Grace King was inside of the courtroom as that sentence was handed down. She joins us now live. Grace, describe the moment inside of the courtroom when that sentence was read.
It was just a lot of silence and a lot of disappointment from many of the families. A lot of the families had wanted a longer sentence and had hoped that, Colin Gray might not be able to see a life outside of prison. He had hoped that, he's 55 years old, 15 years would put him at 70 years. They were hoping something longer would ensure that he wouldn't walk free another day again. A lot of them said during victim impact sentencing, what happened on September 4th for them is a life sentence. They'll never get their loved ones. They'll never get to see them get married or graduate school. For the wife of Coach Aspinwall, she said, her girls, the younger one doesn't even understand that her dad's gone. She has to put the older one in therapy because Colin Gray didn't send Colt Gray to therapy. And she was just saying, I hope you receive the maximum because what you have given us is the worst possible sentence of them all. So just a lot of disappointment. Some of the family members were saying, this isn't what we wanted, but I guess we'll have to accept it. But again, the judge just said, he felt for the level of criminal culpability involved here, 15 years was the appropriate sentence.
And I know we also heard from District Attorney Brad Smith. For folks who've been with us throughout our coverage this afternoon, we saw that press conference in full. But Grace, I know you were there. You got a chance to ask a district attorney some questions. What was his reaction to the sentence?
Well, I asked him, 15 years, what precedent does that set across the country? And he said, he thinks it's not so much the sentence that will set this precedent across the country, but just knowing that a parent could be held liable for their child's action, especially with something as serious as second-degree murder. He says, in this case, we know that Marcy Gray, the mother, had looked up the Ethan Crumbley, Michigan case where the school shooter parents were charged there. She was Googling how did the Crumbley parents get convicted? What happened there? And she called Colin Gray 6 times that hour. Of course, prosecutors don't know exactly what the contents of that call was, but they said Colin Gray was likely very aware that this was a possibility. They said, he was Googling gun safes. He had bought gun locks. He just didn't act on any of those things. He was looking into therapy for Colt, but he didn't act on any of those things. So they're saying they hope this case, regardless of the sentence, it wasn't what the prosecutors wanted. He says he hopes this will encourage parents to just, keep more of an eye on their kids. If they have access to firearms and they might be struggling, take that access away, secure your guns. He says, I'm a gun owner myself and I'm not anti-gun, but there are situations where you need to be able to take those guns out of the home away from your kids, especially if they're struggling with mental health, if they have some of those violent tendencies. So he says this isn't, the sentence they wanted today, but he hopes it's enough to hopefully discourage other school shootings and encourage parents to prevent them.
We also heard from Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith. His deputies were the very first responders on scene back in September of 2024 to the attack that took place at Appalachia High School. What stood out to you from Sheriff Smith's remarks?
Sheriff Smith didn't say much. This entire tragedy has just taken such a toll on him and his deputies, having to walk into that school that day, see the horror up close, respond to it in the moment. It's really stuck with him. They've watched all the body cam video. He obviously was here for most of Colin Gray's trial and then most of Colt's sentencing. He saw all the evidence and he was just very upset that this could happen in his community. And at the end of it, he said, we just need our space, let us heal. And that's what this community is going to continue to do, is heal.
And Grace, this has been almost 2 years from that September 2024 shooting. In the span of 1 week now, this week, we've seen the sentencing of both Colt Gray, the shooter, and Colin Gray, the father. For everybody inside of that courtroom, for the judge, for the attorneys, what does it mean to have at least this chapter, the legal proceedings, come to a conclusion, and come to a conclusion just a day before Barrow County students go back to school?
Well, they said they were hoping to get this done before the school year started because they were hoping, obviously it's going to be challenging returning to school, knowing this has happened, but they wanted that closure just so the families had it. They didn't want to, a lot of the victims in this case are kids still at Appalachia High School. They're still in college, and they didn't want to have them leave class again. They've already had so much of their school year disrupted because of this shooting back in 2024 and of course after. So they just said, we were hoping to get as much of this done as possible. They were able to do that, but of course it's been a long time coming. A lot of this evidence was really, really hard to watch, just seeing the worst days of their loved ones' lives playing out in front of them, just hearing how obsessed and fascinated Colin Gray was with other school shooters. You know, the judge was saying this wasn't a shooting out of hatred, this wasn't a shooting out of mental health, this was really just a kid that wanted to be famous for the wrong reasons. And he was saying that intention is why he sentenced Colin to life without the possibility of parole. And for the families to see that, to hear that, was just really sickening for them and really hard to listen. So they're just glad that chapter is over for Colt. They know there's no chance he'll get out of prison. For Colin, of course, they hope he won't see the outside, but time will tell.
All right, our Grace King reporting live for us. Grace, thank you very much.